There is absolutely no goddamn reason why you should have 10 kids. Unless you're adopting them, there's no reason why you should have 10 kids. Especially if you're struggling with your other kids. Just absolutely no fucking reason why. 4 kids, biological, should be the maximum, and even that's pushing it. In my country, Indonesia, there's a saying that roughly translates into this: more children will bring more wealth. It's not that popular nowadays, but back then people would have more than 10 kids. My dad has 6 siblings and my mom has 4 siblings. Back then, that saying could be true, as most people have their own business, shops, farms, etc. So more kids mean there's more people that could help on their shops or farms, and they would grow their parents' business in the future. As living cost became more and more expensive, especially education, most families would only have 1 or 2 kids, maybe sometimes 3 if they're rich. Edit. As far as I know, that saying was popular in the 60s, 80s. In the 90s, there was a government program that says, 2 children is enough. I didn't know if this is mandatory or if there was any incentives or not, as I was born in the 90s. Today it's quite rare that a family have 4 kids or more, especially in the cities. Don't wanna hire people? Just make your own people. Big brain strats lol. Yeah, the raw on offspring is abysmal these days. Can vouch. I'm Indonesian and my grandparents had 7 kids to help them expand their business. My nana, born in 1933, who had 12 kids and raised 10, her first-in-last didn't make it, always says. It was easier raising 10 back then than it is today. My father had 17 siblings, none were adopted of course, all by my one and only grandma. If I remembered correctly, Ju didn't make it during childhood, but he would definitely agree that being raised with such conditions in this day and age would be horrendous financially. Even my aunt, who raises her 7 kids, is struggling from time to time nowadays. If you're having 10 kids, I assume you're running a farm. My grandpa's grandpa had 24 kids with 2 wives because of this. Especially since statistically they all wouldn't survive, but they all did. My grandparents had 10 kids. Definitely weren't running a farm while living in Brooklyn. Yeah, my mom's friend has 11 kids and she always talks about how hard it is financially and mentally. I'm like, you don't have to have 11 kids. And BTW, she's pregnant with another one. People act like not getting pregnant is that hard. I don't get how they do it. I'm a first-time mom with 5 twins and I'm just always tired, and I don't even do a full bladder control back yet, and a bunch of moms say that like 15 months post. Maybe I can do this one more time, but like, not 8 more. In fact, they don't do it. They leave the responsibility to their older children. Source: my grandparents with my uncles and aunts. If you haven't already, schedule some PT to help with the bladder control. Pelvic floor dysfunction is very common after birth. It used to be back in like 1800 that you would have 6 kids for your farm, but 3 would die of disease or something, so you now only have 3 kids, of which, your so died in a war or something. This is how the population was stable. Then technology happened, and people died less often, so once all of these babies didn't immediately die, you had like 7 kids or something. And since it was common for their time, your kids would do the same. But your grandchildren would be so well off that they only wanted like 2 or 3. That's how the population boom happened. It's currently happening in Africa right now. The common age in some countries is like 14 due to the population explosion there. Yeah, people don't realize that in some of our lifetimes we're gonna have a population crisis. It's happening in Japan, where there are lots of old and fewer young people. The only reason populations right now go up is because of developing countries such as Nigeria, I believe. If you have 10 kids, you're probably just trying to make a collection at that point. I used to work with this guy at a job that paid between $15 to $20 an hour, so like $28,000 to $38,000 a year. I've heard on average it costs about $14,000 per year for child-related expenses. This dude was a hardcore Christian, and I asked him one day when he was going to stop having kids, because I'm pretty sure he had like 4 or 5, and his response was, as long as God keeps blessing me with children, I'll keep having them. Like, motherfucker, what? Pretty sure God would appreciate you giving what children you have a decent life than trying to repopulate the earth on your own. My family is religious. Back when I had my vasectomy done, was 27 with a kid on the way, I got called selfish by their church pals. To this day I still haven't received an explanation on why it was selfish to not want more kids. Mayo. I knew a guy like that. He worked as a pastor for a small church, obviously not making enough money to support all his kids. He wanted 8+ kids, I think. He made it so their middle initials combined chronologically spelled out Men of God, and they were all named after books of the Bible. Years later it turns out he was abusing his family and it was not safe for his wife to continue to have kids, but he insisted anyway. I'll go one further and just straight out say there are people who just shouldn't have kids. Mental health worker, worked with a pregnant 20-year-old with 2 kids. No job, no high school diploma, myriad of mental health issues, living entirely off the system yet complaining that she wanted to do more, move to a nicer place, work, buy nice things, get a car. It's like, stop fucking having kids if you're trying to not be poor. Their mother who has 6 or 7 kids, same boat. Mental health issues, lived off system, lazy, didn't know their shit stunk. Agreed. Some people absolutely should not have kids. A woman I went to school with had 3 kids before she was 20, and she lost custody of all of them. She's never had a stable job and is still in absolute state today. Has she stopped having kids? No. Will she continuously lose custody of almost of them? Very likely. I don't know what her upbringing was like, but she was a troubled, difficult kid in school who was unmotivated to try. I see her around sometimes, and her situation is frustrating and sad. I feel more for her poor kids who end up going to foster homes because she can't be helped, and won't stop having kids and rants about them on Facebook. I can't stand people like her. I know of a family where they had 8 kids, and struggled to put food on the table. If they had just had the amount of kids, they would all get the attention they need, the help they need, and not having to worry too much about food and money. Not only that, but often this happens to those who don't have the financial means to support those kids. Lack of education, lack of common sense, lack of financial stability. But they sure can pop them out. 2 kids, for those that want them, is reasonable. Multitudes of them, is not. It is common in many religious sects to shun birth control. The quiverful concept takes it a bit far though. It turned out Andrea Yates followed this. I know a girl from high school who, while nice enough, isn't the smartest. And she has 8 kids. All with ASD, of varying degrees of severity. And I want to feel bad for her, but she pulls stupid stunts like having all of them when she can't afford them. So she likely gets government assistance. But then feeds them, what I assume, is cheap dollar store junk with little to no nutritional value. When someone calls CPS on her, she and her family run in the middle of the night to a new state. I'm Nigerian and some people over here collect children like they're Pokemon. Our firm recently hired a woman who has 8. She talks about it constantly, not any of the actual kids as a normal person would. No, she just talks about having 8 kids non-stop. She also constantly uses the fact that she has so many to dodge out of doing work or getting up to speed in her job, citing that she's being pulled in too many directions in her personal life. I chose to be child-free, but why does she, and others like her, think that her overactive reproduction has somehow earned her less responsibility in the workplace? Maybe I'm just not empathetic, but I've wasted 3 months of my life coaching her in her role and trying to get her up to speed. A big part of me wonders if it ever even crossed her mind during pregnancy number 4, 5, 8 if she actually could also manage a career. Absolutely nuts. And the comment of how the older ones just raise the younger ones that I've heard from her. That's just taking part of childhood away from the older children to burden them with a parental role and is not fair. That system also takes away special one-on-one bonding time with the parents that kids benefit from so much. Forcing your older children to take care of your younger children is despicable. They're kids. They should be focusing on their own development, schooling, having fun, living their own lives. Yes, it's fine to help out sometimes, learn how to change a diaper, etc., but using them as a free babysitter is horrible. I had a friend in high school that had a full-time job outside of school but constantly had to change up her schedule because her stepdad demanded she babysit her half-brothers all the time. And then when she graduated, they kicked her out of the house because they didn't want her brothers to share a room anymore. So we offered to rent her the spare room in my parents' house for $150 a month. She lived with my parents for 5 years. My sister, who has 3 children that I love to the moon and back, is one of those people who shouldn't have had kids. She has a long list of mental health problems, bipolar, split personality, schizophrenia, etc., and can hardly handle them. Her first grader is starting to show signs of anger problems, and all my sister does is pawn them off to the grandparents, so it isn't her problem. This is why I promote birth control and the fact that people don't have to have kids even though society pushes the idea on people. My husband and I always wanted 3 kids. Whenever we talked about having a family, it was always with 3 kids. We bought a minivan because we always figured we'd have 3. We have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old and have come to realize that we don't want another. Mentally, we are at capacity with them, and we felt that if we added another, we would not be able to be the parents we want to be. Our time would be too divided, our stress would increase, and it's not fair to our 2 kids who are already here. And we feel good about that decision. This might be even more unpopular, but if you can't afford it, don't have kids. And I've seen people who can barely afford to have 1 kid have 3. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have the right to become a parent. But making your kids starve while you keep pumping out more is just short-sightedness and dumb. My GF's mom was a health visitor specializing in infant health and would go and give consultations to people who absolutely should not have been having children. She told me that one of her colleagues was given a formal warning for asking a penniless taxi driver why the hell he was having a 6th child when he could barely afford to raise the first 2. That's half the problem though, people believing it's their right to have children. Maybe if more could see it as a privilege to have a child, the world could be a lot more of a healthy place. Maybe in your country there is none. But in mine, France, you get a financial help each month for each kid you have. For the people who abuse it, it is a full-time job. You can see fathers driving a BMW or an Audi while they are unemployed.